If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a paternity report with trembling hands, I would have laughed. Claire and I were the couple people described as solid. We had the kind of marriage that looked effortless from the outside, comfortable silences, shared routines, inside jokes that had long outlived their punchlines. But quiet doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the sound of something breaking so slowly you can't hear it. My name is Ryan, 34, an IT consultant who measures life in small certainties: morning coffee, client calls, the familiar scent of lavender from Claire's side of the bed. My wife, Claire, 32, is an art teacher who paints emotion the way others breathe. When she's happy, her world blooms in color. When she's restless, everything turns gray. For years, I mistook her gray seasons for creative moods. I never realized they were storms gathering behind my back. It began subtly: late nights at work, laughter that didn't include me, her perfume lingering long after she left the house. I told myself not to overthink it. Every couple goes through dull patches, right? Yet there was something in her eyes, a distant glimmer that made me feel like a guest in my own marriage. Then one night, as she leaned over the sink rinsing a wineglass, her phone lit up on the counter. A message preview glowed against the marble surface: "I can still taste you." My breath caught. My mind refused to process the words. By the time she turned around, I'd already looked away, pretending not to have seen. She smiled at me then, gentle, practiced, dangerous. From that moment, a quiet war began inside me. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but fear wrapped itself around my throat. What if I was wrong? What if I destroyed something still worth saving? So instead, I watched. I memorized the shifts in her tone, the way her laughter faltered when I entered a room. Love makes you a poor detective. You start collecting hope instead of evidence. Weeks passed before the first confrontation, though I barely remember what sparked it. Maybe it was her cold distance in bed, or maybe I simply ran out of excuses. I asked her if she was happy, an innocent question loaded with desperation. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me as if weighing whether honesty was worth the cost. That silence told me everything. Later that night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her whispering in the kitchen. "I can't talk now, he's upstairs." The sound of her voice, soft, guilty, tender, cut deeper than any confession could. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, realizing that the woman breathing beside me was already gone. And that was the moment I understood. The life we built wasn't crumbling, it had already collapsed, and I was only just noticing the dust. I met Claire during my junior year of college. She was the kind of person who drew light to her, vibrant, unpredictable, the sort of woman who turned small talk into poetry. I was her opposite in every way: methodical, quiet, comfortable in the margins. She said I made her feel safe. I told her she made me feel alive. For a while, that balance worked. We married young, too young perhaps, when love still felt like a shield against everything that could go wrong. The first few years were simple: late-night takeout, cramped apartments, endless promises about the future. When we finally bought our small house on the outskirts of Portland, I thought we'd made it. We weren't rich, but our love had a kind of quiet wealth, a rhythm that felt permanent. But permanence is an illusion. It's strange how betrayal begins not with a grand moment, but with silence, the kind that creeps between two people sharing a meal, the kind that lingers after goodnight. I'd come home from work and find her half turned toward the window, lost in thoughts she wouldn't share. She started wearing lipstick again for office meetings. The details didn't add up, but I told myself that marriage meant trust, and trust meant not asking too many questions. The irony is that I didn't lose her all at once. I lost her in pieces: missed dinners, unanswered texts, an absent smile. And still, I kept trying. I planned weekend trips she cancelled. I made her coffee every morning, though she rarely drank it anymore. Loving her had become a habit, one I didn't know how to quit. Then one night, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the dresser. I didn't mean to look, but I did. The message was short, intimate, unmistakable: "Last night was worth the risk." My hands went numb. The room felt colder, quieter. For a long minute, I just stared at the screen, hoping it would rewrite itself. When she came out, towel wrapped around her hair, I asked who it was. She smiled faintly, said, "Just a coworker joke," and kissed my cheek as if nothing had changed. But everything had. After that, I began noticing the cracks I'd ignored before: her distracted gaze, her sudden bursts of guilt-fueled affection, her avoidance of my eyes when I said, "I love you." One evening, we sat across from each other at dinner, her scrolling through her phone, me pretending to eat. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth. Instead, I asked if she was happy. She paused, fork hovering midair, and whispered, "I don't know." That was the most honest thing she'd said in months. Later, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing how fragile love really is. You spend years building trust, brick by brick, and it takes one secret to tear it all down. The next morning, when she kissed me goodbye, I noticed something new in her tone, an apology she hadn't yet spoken. And I knew, somehow, that the real story hadn't even begun. The confession didn't come through confrontation, it came through collapse. Claire had been distant for weeks, retreating behind a mask of fatigue and vague excuses. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The television played on mute. When she looked up at me, her eyes were already swollen from crying. "Ryan," she whispered, voice trembling, "I did something terrible." It's strange how a single sentence can freeze time. I stood there, coat half off, waiting for words that would undo what she'd just said. None came. Her confession spilled out between sobs. There was a man from work, Evan, someone she'd grown close to during long project nights. "It just happened," she said, as though betrayal were something accidental, like spilling wine on a white shirt. I listened in silence, every syllable carving deeper into me. My heart felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else, a man who used to believe in her. When she said, "It only happened a few times," I almost laughed. The human mind searches for limits in pain, as if quantifying betrayal could make it hurt less. But there are no safe fractions of infidelity. There is only before and after. I left without saying a word. I remember driving aimlessly through the city, headlights slicing through the drizzle. I parked by the river and sat there for hours, watching ripples spread across the water, wondering if my life was doing the same, fracturing outward from one irreversible moment. When I finally returned home, Claire was waiting by the door, tear-streaked, desperate. She tried to touch my arm. I flinched. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "It's over. I swear it's over. I just want to fix this." But her words slid past me like smoke. How do you repair something you've already burned? Days passed in silence. I slept in the guest room. She left apology notes on the kitchen counter. Each one started with "Please believe me," as if faith could be rebuilt with paper and ink. Then, one morning, she told me she thought she might be pregnant. The air left my lungs. My first instinct was denial. This couldn't be real, not after everything. But when she placed the test in my trembling hands, two faint lines stared back at me like a cruel joke. She looked terrified, guilty, fragile. "Ryan," she whispered, "I don't know if it's yours." The room spun. My mind flooded with static memories, arguments, laughter, all colliding into a single truth. The woman I loved had turned our life into a question I didn't want the answer to. And in that moment, standing in our kitchen surrounded by ghosts of who we used to be, I realized this wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation. Yet beneath all that ruin, a strange thought echoed. What if I still loved her, even now? The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, thin, unremarkable, resting on the kitchen counter beside an untouched cup of coffee. I stared at it for nearly an hour before opening it, tracing the edges like a wound I wasn't ready to expose. Claire stood across from me, hands trembling, face pale. She hadn't said a word all morning. When I finally tore the seal, I could feel her breath hitch. My eyes scanned the lines once, twice, 3 times, as if repetition might change the outcome. Probability of paternity, 0%. The words were simple. Final. Unforgiving. Claire gasped when she saw my expression. "Please," she said, voice cracking, "it wasn't supposed to be this way." But there's no way betrayal is supposed to be. There's only the hollow aftermath, the realization that love has been replaced by pity and disbelief. I set the paper down and looked at her, really looked at her, and I barely recognized the woman in front of me. She wasn't the Claire I'd married, the one who painted our walls and dreamed aloud about family trips. This was someone smaller, fractured by choices she couldn't undo. "Ryan," she whispered, taking a hesitant step forward, "I know I've ruined everything. But please, this baby, she doesn't deserve to grow up without a father. You've always wanted to be one." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to scream, to ask how she could even think of asking me that. But instead, I just felt empty. The kind of emptiness that swallows sound. "You want me," I said slowly, "to raise his child." Tears filled her eyes. "I want you to raise our future. You're the only one who knows how to love without hate." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that startled even me. "You mistook my love for weakness," I said. "You thought I'd always forgive you, no matter how deep you cut." She tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. The silence between us stretched, heavy and final. In it, I realized there was nothing left to fight for. Love can survive disappointment, distance, even disillusionment, but not deceit layered with expectation. When she finally left that day, she didn't look back. I stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the street, the paternity test still trembling in my fingers. It should have felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like a slow unbinding, a quiet release from years of denial. But deep down, beneath the anger and sorrow, one question remained, a cruel whisper I couldn't silence. If love once felt real, does its death make the past a lie? That question lingered long after she was gone, haunting the edges of every breath. And though I didn't know it yet, her story and mine wasn't finished. Not even close. Months passed after Claire left, though time no longer felt linear. Some mornings stretched endlessly, others vanished before I realized I'd even lived them. The house, once filled with the hum of her presence, the sound of running water, the faint music from her studio, now echoed with stillness. At first, that silence was unbearable. Then it became familiar. Then it became peace. I packed her things slowly. Each box felt like a small funeral. Her scarves still smelled faintly of paint and citrus. Her sketchbooks were half finished, lines abandoned mid-stroke, like our marriage, incomplete and unresolved. I didn't throw them away. I just stacked them neatly in the attic, where forgotten things go to rest. Work became my anchor. Deadlines, numbers, systems, things that made sense when nothing else did. But even amid routine, grief had a way of slipping through the cracks. Sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary day, I'd remember the way she laughed, or the warmth of her hand when she used to reach for mine. The memories didn't hurt as sharply as before. They simply reminded me that once, I had loved deeply, and that wasn't something to regret. Claire reached out once, months later. Her message was short: "She's here. Her name is Lily." Attached was a single photo, a newborn wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. Claire's eyes were tired but gentle, filled with something that looked like fragile hope. I stared at that photo for a long time before setting my phone down. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. But that night, I dreamt of the river, the same one I'd sat beside after her confession. Only this time, the water wasn't dark or restless. It was calm, reflecting the early morning light. And in that reflection, I saw myself not as the man she broke, but as someone learning to live again. Healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't come in a rush or revelation. It's quiet, a series of small mercies that accumulate until one day, you realize the ache has dulled. I started hiking again. Bought a camera. Began taking pictures of things I'd stopped noticing. Sunlight through trees, strangers laughing, the world existing without my sorrow. Somewhere along the way, I understood that forgiveness wasn't a gift for her, it was a release for me. One evening, as I stood by the river's edge with my camera, I whispered into the wind, "I forgive you, Claire." Not because she deserved it, but because I did. The horizon was painted in gold and violet, the same colors she once used in her art. I smiled at the thought. Some endings arrive not with a crash, but with a breath. And as the sun sank behind the water, I realized something simple, almost tender. The story of us was over, but mine was just beginning.